Hello and welcome to Handing the Shame Back, a channel dedicated to the amazing adults across the world who have experienced child sexual abuse. We know the numbers are huge, we know the impacts are even bigger. And this is one small attempt at providing a safe space for you amazing survivors to land, to share stories, and to get some resource and support through tips, blogs, and survivor experience. My name's Glory Masters. I'm your host, and each week I bring you someone special to the show. And this week, before we launch into part two, please know there's a trigger warning, and we do it to protect you, simply because you don't need to be triggered or feel unsafe. If that happens, go to the show notes below. You'll be directed to some resource and support. So we now have Justine Dean, part two. Part one was riveting. We actually forgot the time, so excuse us. But she is, I should remind you of who she is. She's a coach, she's a mentor, she's a confidant. Couldn't we all do with one of those? And she brings a lot to the survivor space. So she's from New South Wales, which is a state in Australia, and she's south of Sydney. Welcome back to the show, Justine.
Thanks, Gloria.
I'm quite proud of myself that I managed to say all of that.
You did really well.
So look, we're into part two. It's been riveting, I have to say. So I guess I'm just checking in with you now, and you as perhaps a young adult, what sort of helped you? What happened in your life once you were able to perhaps escape the family home?
I did leave very young, and married very young. I was 18, and I believe I loved my husband dearly. He was a beautiful man, but he was the wrong person for me, and I was definitely the wrong person for him. It was quite, that toxic bond. And I stayed with him until I was 27. I had a child when I was 23. And my husband was a heavy drinker. I wouldn't say he was an alcoholic. He was a heavy drinker. He was very popular in the community that we were in. He was a first grade rugby union player. And I left him because he was quite aggressive. He didn't ever hit me, but, I chose a relationship that confirmed what I believed about myself. And when I left, I drove to Brisbane to my parents' house, and by the time I'd gotten there, my mum had called him and said, "She's here, come and get her." And when I got there, she said, "You will not leave him. Don't you dare embarrass me." So again, that it wasn't about me. But the way that it impacted me was that I had, after separating from him, had obviously no self-esteem, no value in myself. So I partnered with somebody else who confirmed and I rejected relationships that would have been amazing for me.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I was buying books and reading books about relationships, and not so much the sexual abuse, but being a better person, how to be a great wife, and how to be a better person, because all of the messaging I'd gotten, whether it was inferred or actually said, was you're not enough.
Yeah.
You don't deserve protecting. You're a piece of shit, like all of that yucky stuff. And I thought, well, there's something really wrong with me that all of this has happened and everyone's treating me like shit. So I read at least 100 books. When I left my first husband, I left boxes of self-development books under the bed. I tried counseling, psychotherapy. I was on and off antidepressants for about 30 years. And I found that the talk therapies were sometimes it was useful because I felt like, oh my God, somebody's listening to me. They see me. They have empathy. They are hearing me. Like somebody believes me. And that is a gift when somebody holds space for you and they get you. I think one important thing to note is that what I found over 30 years, I just kept reaching out for help until I found someone that I clicked with. I think one thing that can be really damaging, and it happened to me, is where I reached out for help and the person was just, it was the wrong fit, whether it was a personality clash or the person wasn't trauma informed in, with what happened with me. So I thought, well, this doesn't work, and stopped for a while. But all the horrible patterns and the feelings and the panic attacks and migraines, like my body was just screaming at me that this world around me was not great. So and nobody would have known. I was the best I was wonderful at supporting the family and hiding all of it. And when I left, everyone was shocked. Um, yeah, I totally went off on a tangent there. Sorry.
No, that's okay, because I'd like to actually make sense of that with our audience, if okay. So, hello, beautiful ones again. What I'm trying to show is it's interesting. In my opinion, we're templated with what we're comfortable with. We're conditioned. So, Justin, be interested to know what you think about this. We're templated with what we grew up with and what we got used to, and therefore what we're comfortable with, even though it was horrible and scary and abusive and disregarding of or minimizing of us. It's children. So it's no surprise that we will grow up and graduate into new relationships, new experiences, but basically different day, same raincoat. And so what you're talking about in Survivors, what I'm trying to show is never beat yourselves up if you realize you just kept repeating the same pattern, because until you are ready to deal with it, you won't be able to see it. What do you think of that, Justine?
I agree wholeheartedly. Triggers are there to teach you something. If you're triggered, and it's about looking at that trigger, and they'll hang around until you heal it. I'll give you a simple example about repeating patterns and what we believe about ourselves. My first date with my first husband, he picked me up from home. I think I was 16 or 17, drove down the road, pulled up at the pub and said, I've just got to go in and see a couple of mates about the footy game. And I sat in the car for 45 minutes while he had a few drinks, and he came out and drove me home. The key to this is, what would somebody who allowed that, like, what did I believe about myself and the world around me and what I deserved and what was normal, that had me just sitting there accepting that was the way that you just get treated. And until I changed what I believed about myself, I kept repeating those patterns.
And it comes back to those three little words you shared in part one. What about me?
Yeah. Because you think about someone who had been raised with self-worth, someone who would have, just say my mother had been different and it was different circumstances, and she stopped it immediately, listened to me, made me feel safe, wrapped me in her arms, addressed it, had the resources. I appreciate that back then there was a lot less resources than there are now. I would have believed that I was worth protecting, that I deserved, that I was a good girl, that, I would have decided so much differently about myself, and I never would have tolerated that. When these things happen to us when we're little people, particularly if we're not being protected or heard, we make decisions about what that means about us and the world around us with the emotional maturity of a carrot. We don't have the capacity to decide what's the truth. And if we've got adults telling us that we're not, to shut up and keep a secret, or you deserve this, so kids take it literally. Okay, well, I must be bad. And this is just what happens and I can't speak about it.
So, and 100%, and thank you. I think that's a really, really simple but clear way of explaining that. So, for you, that marriage didn't last, thank heavens. Then you moved on, and you met the right person for you,
No, I did it again. I made the mistake again. I
right?
actually went back to my first husband a couple of times.
Yeah.
Um, and there was, all of the fear and all sorts of reasons. And then 3 years later, I chose another partner who was very bad for me. I think when you believe all of those, you have your set of beliefs. It's like, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, and then you're looking at hang on, you're looking at the world through all of these lenses about the way that you see yourself. So you can't not choose somebody who's bad for you or somebody who will
Oh, of
confirm that
course
for
not.
you.
No.
So I did it again. And then I was with him for about 2 years, and then I went and had some really, really good therapy. Um, and luckily, I finished that about 3 months before I met my current partner. And I still, over the last 22 years, I still display some behaviors, the approval seeking, the controlling behavior. I was a control freak. I was so terrified of everything that I had to control it. Like there's so many behaviors that came of something so long ago.
100%, and it emerges, doesn't it? And it's fear driven, of course. But I
Yeah.
guess I'm just interested in, you've got this fabulous husband who, you've been with for 22 years, which is amazing. Well done. What has helped you? You've mentioned therapy. You've mentioned kind of connecting the dots, in terms of patterns of behavior. What else, what modalities helped you to move through this into the healing phase?
The most significant one was NLP, so neuro linguistic programming. And I had such huge results from that that I immediately went and trained as an NLP practitioner,
Wow.
um, and hypnotherapy as well. They're the two main ones. But I one of my clients has now become my best friend and my coach. At times, she does a lot of somatic therapies, and she is absolutely phenomenal. So breath work, meditation, yoga. It's very difficult for someone who's been through any kind of trauma to sit in their body, and because I disassociated so much. So the somatic side of it is just as important as the mindset
Yeah.
and the talk stuff. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And
Mm,
I love that you say that, because not everyone can handle talking therapy. Um,
yeah,
some For some people, they would, much prefer to use other modalities, and the somatic stuff, as you say, is so important because the body, as we know, never forgets, and,
that's right.
and it holds on to the trauma. And did you have, when you think about the work you're doing now, are you able to share with us what you're doing at the moment?
So I did the NLP training maybe 8 years ago now,
Yeah.
and I've been a life coach for over 10 years. However, it's now gotten into using NLP, using the subconscious mind, and a little bit of hypnotherapy as a combined modalities. So I coach people now. They will present with all sorts of different things like relationship issues or trouble at work, and to me it's never the presenting problem. There's always something behind it. And I think, and you probably know this too, if you've lived it, you see it in other people.
Yeah.
And it's the very subtle nuances in their languaging and their facial expressions. Being able to see you today is beautiful because I'm trained at observing physiology, and there's, I guess, my hypervigilance around all of that um, allows me to see a little bit more into what else is going on. And quite often, someone will work with me for 3 or 4 months and then finally go, it's not just the kids, it's not just work, and maybe it is related to that, to something in the past. So I really love doing that, and I also teach a lot of people about personality types and love languages,
Right.
because the more we learn about ourselves and the way that we behave, the safer we feel with ourselves. You know, it hasn't all been wine and roses for myself and my husband. We both, there's a little bit of a trauma bond going on there, and
Yeah.
but we work on it together. He made me feel safe, um, in all aspects. So it's a constant learning process.
And I love that you say that, because I think, you, as you're saying, and for survivors watching, you know, healing is not linear.
Mm,
Some days we can take huge leaps forward. Other days it feels like we take huge leaps back. And you know what? That's okay.
yeah.
I think, Justine, you'll agree.
Oh,
We are where we need to be, and it's just, I think,
mm,
about, giving grace to ourselves, because that
mm,
can be really hard as survivors. We're used to being quite self-punitive and not kind to ourselves. So
mm.
do you have any, I will put all your links into the show notes. I will put in everything you share into the show notes. Are there any sort of publications or podcasts or anything that you run yourself?
I don't run any podcasts. However, I have written a book on love languages, and I condensed it down to 13 pages. It takes about 45 minutes to read.
Wow. And
But
what's it called?
I don't like all the padding. It's on my website. But the interesting thing is that when I did public speaking, I did a couple of national tours with a large organization and did my workshop. People would come up and say, "Look, I get that, but how do I relate it to my children?" So the short story is, it's Love Language as a Parent's Guide. However, everybody who's read the book has come back to me and said, "Oh my God, it's really helped me with my kids, but holy cow, it's helped me understand my childhood." So
Oh,
that has been really interesting. One book I would recommend is Fake Love by Nova Gibson. I mentioned that in part one.
yeah.
That is phenomenal. It's the most condensed, thorough, and simple explanation. I use Audible a lot. It's available on Audible. I might, if I may, in the show notes, recommend a couple of other books.
Of course. And
Yeah,
do you have and I'll also get from you, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us, you know, the links to your website, all of
sure.
that you're doing. So, just thinking about, where you've begun and what you've moved to, and I know it never ceases to just warm my heart at the beautiful nature of the survivors like yourself that we have on the show, because
Mm,
in spite of it all, look at who you are now, and wow, and we're
thank you.
just
I
beautiful.
think Thank you so much. I think it's extremely important for survivors to all realize that, and Kelly Humphreys says this, um, perpetrators choose beautiful, beautiful human beings. And that's the saddest thing, because we believe, until we do some healing, that it's our fault,
Yes,
you know. And the survivors, it's about keeping going, keep reaching out, be gentle with yourself, have patience, because it is a roller coaster.
yeah,
Um, yeah, but you're so worthy of healing.
yeah. Well, you're always who you were meant to be, and
Mm,
that beautiful little child does shine through. And even when we believe that's not available, to us, it's coming. So
Yeah.
I suppose, Justine, is there any other any kind of other things you would like to share with us? It may not be about advice, it might be about experiences that you've had that have helped you along the way. It could be anything. Any
Yeah, look, I
sort
think,
of
I would strongly encourage people to try different things. I think what's been really valuable to me is I joined a women's circle last year with a brilliant facilitator here who trains women's circle facilitators. And I know that there's a lot of beautiful men's circles and men's retreats available as well. And sometimes it's really terrifying to reach out and go to group things because we might judge our event and our own lives as either being not significant, not bad enough. We judge ourselves in that way. And we might also say, what I went through what would be too much for other people. So we isolate ourselves. And I think it's in isolating ourselves further because we had to deal with it alone when we were younger. So we've been trained to isolate ourselves, and whatever it is going on with us is either not enough or too much for others, or we don't deserve support. And I think I really implore that you reach out, and group things are just wonderful under the right facilitator because you realize you're not alone. And you can have wonderful healing experiences when other people witness you, or even just witnessing other people having conversations, any kind of forum environment, even like this, because there'd be people watching today going, oh my goodness, I feel like that too. Or, oh, there is hope for me.
Well, and I love what you're saying because you've already said it, you've lived it, you see it. And
Mm,
I say it slightly differently in that as survivors, we actually don't need to explain anything
mm,
because we get it, we
yes,
experienced it, so our antennaes up for it. But equally, gosh, there's a look on that face. Yep, I know that look.
100%.
So that's the beauty of your women's circles, as you're saying, or survivor
Mm,
groups. And sometimes I think for survivors, and this is why I'm so humbled to be able to bring this channel to people, because with survivors, we understand so much more easily and quickly than
mm,
non-survivors. We don't
yeah,
actually have to explain it. We can just sit there and say, how are you today? Oh, it's
yeah,
been a tough one. I thought I saw someone that looked like the
mm,
accuser. Instantly, we're with you. Yep, we've already got, yes,
got
you're
it.
good. Yes, oh, how's that showing for you? Are you withdrawing? Yep, got it. Whereas with
Yeah,
non-survivors, bless their hearts, no disrespect to the non-survivor switching, it's not always as simple. So I love that.
mm,
So I just as we're going into close, I guess, I just want to say thank you so much for making the time today.
thank you. I'm
And
very grateful.
it's just a beautiful heart that you have and the wisdom that you share. So please stay right there, Justine, while we close out. Really inspirational guests with us today, and Justine, and so grateful to her. And she said several things that are really resonated, as I know they would have with you guys. So, if you've lived it, you see it. I really like that. I might steal that, and I will credit her. But she also said that the more we learn about ourselves and then work with that, the safer we then feel. And I really like that too, because it's almost like a bridge. You can't, once you know something, you can't unknow it. And I think that's a real gift. So, as always, beautiful people, I see you, I stand beside you, and I believe you.